And this is my water. Anybody that wants to share it is welcome to. Just for the record, I've already taken a sip. All right, I am absolutely thrilled, as you can imagine, and delighted to be here today with all of you and all of my colleagues who I've gotten to know so very, very well over the last 2.5 years. And I want to begin by introducing them. I have them in different order, so I'm just going to go by the order that I have here, and maybe they can just stand up and give you a wave. Minister Darren Billis from Alberta, Minister Roger Melanson from New Brunswick, Minister Lise Thiero from Quebec, Minister Christopher Mitchellmore from Newfoundland and Labrador, Minister Michelle Sampson from Nova Scotia, Minister Heath MacDonald from Prince Edward Island, Minister Jeremy Harrison from Saskatchewan, Minister Ranj Pillai from Yukon, and of course, Minister Navdeep Bains from the Government of Ontario. Some of you, the Government of Canada. He is from Ontario, though. You'll find ministers from provinces will often use Canada in their province interchangeably. I want to also acknowledge some of our colleagues that weren't able to make it here today, and some of them played a key role, as my friends up here will tell you, in getting us to where we are today, but they just weren't able. Don't read anything into this. They just weren't able to make it because of different commitments. But British Columbia, Manitoba, Nunavut, and Northwest Territories are provinces that weren't able to make it here today, but all contributed greatly to where we are today. Together, we've engaged in 21 rounds of negotiations over 2.5 years to secure the most ambitious internal free trade agreement, actually internal or external free trade agreement, that this country has ever had. I'm honored to have served as chair of these negotiations, and I want to thank my colleagues for placing their faith in Ontario to continue to chair these negotiations through the course of the last 2.5 years. And I'm very proud to say on behalf of all of my colleagues that together we have not let Ontarians, Canadians, and all of our respective residents from across the country down. I want to thank all of our colleagues across Canada who have been champions for this agreement in their respective jurisdictions. It wasn't always easy, as my colleagues will tell you. Some of these discussions were difficult. Often we would come to a consensus at our table, but then remember, our ministers would have to go back to their respective cabinets in their provinces and territories and get agreement from their cabinets for the decisions that we were making. So they had to be champions not only of their provinces at the table, but they also had to be champions of free trade and the agreement that we were working towards in their respective jurisdictions. I also want to thank our officials, because our officials have been involved in this for that course of 2.5 years. It's a complex agreement, as you can see when you have a look at it. And we would often have to turn to our officials when we had trouble finding common ground on an issue to see if they could ferret out those areas of common ground. We would not have succeeded without them, and they too deserve to take some pride today in what we've achieved together. Today, I and my colleague economic development ministers are pleased to announce that all provinces, territories, and the federal government have officially signed on to a new historic Canada Free Trade Agreement. The new Canadian Free Trade Agreement represents the most ambitious free trade agreement, international or domestic, in Canadian history. The Canadian Free Trade Agreement sends a message to the world that Canada is open for trade and open for investment. This agreement is a shining example of nation building, and it's fitting that it takes effect on July 1st, 2017, as we celebrate our 150th anniversary as a country. The Canadian Free Trade Agreement is ambitious, balanced, and equitable, and it will help Canada be more competitive as a nation in a fiercely competitive global economy. The Canadian Free Trade Agreement replaces the Agreement on Internal Trade from 1995. Why did we need a new agreement, some may ask? First off, the economy and the world has changed. Canada needs to be at its best to compete in a fiercely competitive global economy. Eliminating barriers to international, provincial, and territorial trade helps make us more competitive. It reduces the costs of doing business in Canada, and it makes us economically strong and creates jobs across this country from coast to coast to coast. Secondly, the Canada-EU agreement was about to take effect. Without the new Canadian Free Trade Agreement, we could have seen a circumstance where EU companies were getting greater access to the Canadian market than homegrown companies. That just didn't make sense to any of us. The Canadian Free Trade Agreement ensures that Canadian companies will have equal or greater access to opportunities than foreign companies under CETA and any other international agreements. Thirdly, technological disruption is changing our world. We need trade agreements that apply to not only sectors that we know of today, but new and evolving sectors. Autonomous vehicles is a perfect example of that. At some point in time, and who knows, maybe it'll be 5 or 10 years from now, somebody's going to want to be able to drive from Newfoundland all the way out to Vancouver in an autonomous vehicle. We need to ensure that we have a harmonious set of regulations for those drivers as they drive across this country. What we've put in place today enables us to take the first steps to ensure that that can happen. Now, how is the Canadian Free Trade Agreement better than the previous agreement? Unlike the previous agreement, the Canadian Free Trade Agreement covers all sectors of the economy. The agreement on internal trade only applied to 11 sectors in the economy. The Canadian Free Trade Agreement takes a different approach. It applies to everything unless specifically excluded. In many ways, it turns the old agreement upside down on its head. Any exclusions that are in place in this new agreement are fully transparent, which I believe is important because it gives our businesses, it gives our media, it gives our public an opportunity to hold our feet to the fire going forward in areas that we can make even further improvements to this deal, because everything that's been excluded is there in front of you in the agreement. Perhaps the crowning achievement of this new free trade agreement is the establishment of a new structure to drive the harmonization or mutual recognition of standards and regulations. The fact is, regulations tend to be one of the most challenging barriers to cross-country trade. Different or conflicting regulations across Canada can absolutely prevent businesses from doing business Canada-wide, and they can impose a significant cost to doing business here in this country. At a time when the world is so fiercely competitive, we can and now we will do better. As of July 1st, Canada will be the first country in the world that we're aware of to have a binding process to harmonize and mutually recognize regulations and standards. The result is that Canada will be an easier, less costly place to do business. Let me give you a couple examples of that, and there are probably thousands. One is trucking regulations. If you're a trucker, there are different regulations in terms of your hours of being able to drive right across this country. Different provinces have different regulations. That makes it difficult for a trucker who's driving cross country. He's got to know the regulations in every province as he's going through, or he or she is going through. So that's a simple one. Another one is gasoline blending. Our producers have to produce a number of different blends of gasoline to ship across the country to go into our pumps because we have different ethanol blending standards in different provinces. That's something that we can tackle, and that'll reduce costs to our fuel producers. One that I've mentioned in the past and has been commonly referred to, and I don't know why people always refer to this, is the dairy creamers. There we go. We've got interest in that. We have different standards for dairy creamers for one reason or another, and probably legitimate reasons originally across the country. That drives our dairy producers and our food processors absolutely crazy. They have to produce different packaging for dairy creamers in every province different provinces across the country. So those are the kind of things. Some of them small, some of them will be quite significant, that will make our country an easier place to do business. This historic agreement addresses the numerous concerns as well that our business community presented at the outset. And I want to thank our business leaders across this country, many of whom are here today, many of whom have contributed significantly to our deliberations. John Manley is president of the Business Council of Canada. Perrin Beatty is president of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. All of our provincial and territorial chambers Our boards of trade have contributed greatly as well. Canadian manufacturers and exporters, I think they have representatives here today as well, and the CFIB, Canadian Federation for Independent Business, who represents small businesses and medium-sized businesses across the country, all played a very important role in our discussions, both within our jurisdictions and nationally. Together, our provincial and territorial governments, our premiers, our federal partners, and our business leaders have taken a major leap forward in opening up Canada for business. This achievement will build a stronger, more prosperous, more united country for us all and for future generations. It's been a privilege and an honor for all of us, I think, to serve on this historic agreement. And now I'd like to call on a very good friend and a colleague who doesn't just represent Ontario, he represents the entire country. Our good friend, our federal counterpart, Minister Navdeep Bains, to make a few comments. Nav?
Bonjour tout le monde, c'est un grand plaisir d'être ici aujourd'hui. Je voudrais remercier toutes les provinces et territoires qui travaillent dur pour cet annoncement aujourd'hui. It really is a pleasure to be here with my provincial and territorial counterparts who worked really hard for this very special announcement today. I do want to take this opportunity to also acknowledge my good friend and colleague, Brad Duguid. Il travaille dur aussi pour l'Ontario et pour cet annoncement aujourd'hui. He worked very, very hard. And his leadership is greatly appreciated. And I want to take this opportunity to thank him and acknowledge his hard work and determination, because he was really focused in making sure that we got this across the finish line. I'd also like to acknowledge the new chair, Roger. I know that Roger has got a lot of work ahead of him as well. But again, just shows how well we're working together. And I look forward to working with him as we go forward to implement some of these measures that we're going to be discussing today. And of course, the provinces and the territories, as mentioned, have worked extremely hard. This was truly a team effort. It was a collective effort, and everyone really stepped up. So it really is an honor and privilege to be here this afternoon on this very historic announcement. In Ottawa, as you know, I get the opportunity to work with many businesses, and those businesses and stakeholders have been mentioned. I'd also like to take this opportunity to acknowledge the Senate Committee on Banking and Trade. They put out various reports. They've been advocating for greater liberalization of trade within Canada, and I want to acknowledge them for their hard work. And in particular, I want to acknowledge my predecessor, James Moore, who started this process in 2014, as you know, along with Minister Duguid and others as well. And I want to acknowledge him for having the vision of bringing this initiative together and moving forward in this positive direction. I've reached out to him and thanked him as well. And it just demonstrates again how many people have been involved in today's announcement. As mentioned, this is a historic announcement. We're on the eve of celebrating Canada's 150th anniversary. So this is a big deal. This is a big deal for Canada, and this is a big deal for Canadians, because this includes all the provinces and all the territories. This includes every single jurisdiction within Canada, and it covers the entire economy. So this is, again, what's so exciting about this initiative, so exciting about the Canada Free Trade Agreement, is the level of ambition, that it covers the entire economy from coast to coast to coast. And this deal, from my perspective, from the federal government's perspective, is really about how do we grow the economy? How do we create good quality jobs? And how do we reduce the red tape and the burdens that exist for businesses? And ultimately, how does this benefit consumers? It's really about helping small businesses in Canada having access to a bigger market now. They have the ability now to do business across the country with less barriers, with less impediments, with regulations being aligned now. And this allows these small businesses to grow and scale up so they can compete not only within Canada, but they can compete globally as well. Of course, they have access to more customers, but this benefits customers as well. It provides more choice for customers. It provides better price points for customers. So this is good for our small businesses who want to grow in Canada, and this is also good for consumers as well. This is, again, being more competitive and making Canada more competitive. C'est une bonne nouvelle pour notre économie. C'est une bonne nouvelle pour la classe moyenne. This is really good news for our economy and really good for our ability to strengthen the middle class. And as I said before, this is really about Canada strengthening its home field advantage. This is something that truly differentiates us versus our peers. And this will have an immediate impact. As mentioned, on July 1st, when this comes into effect, particularly in the area of procurement. As you know, at the federal level, we're making significant investments in infrastructure, $180 billion over the next 10 years. That procurement will be open to all businesses across the country. And this is a very important step. Procurement in energy as well. And of course, as you know, this is something that will benefit many companies also that want to invest in Canada as well. And this sends a very clear message that Canada is open. We're an open society, and we recognize that this is a source of strength for us. This is our competitive advantage. Many of you are aware that the world is becoming inwards, that protectionism is on the rise. And today's announcement on the Canada Free Trade Agreement demonstrates that we are truly open, that we recognize that when we open up our markets, it's better for our businesses, who then are forced to be more innovative, more competitive, and it's better for consumers. And of course, this will help create, as I said, jobs. And this morning, we saw the job numbers come out. An additional 19,400 jobs were created last month. And over the past 8 months, that's 280,000 jobs. So we want to continue to build on that success. We want to continue to demonstrate that an open market, that being open society is actually good for the economy and good for jobs and strengthening the middle class. In closing, I just want to say that this effort was really all hands on deck. This was truly a collective effort. And today what we're showing to Canadians is that we're all working together, regardless of our political persuasion, regardless of our geographic concerns or needs or biases. We've come together and recognizing that the economy is important, that growth is important, that creating good quality jobs is important. And we demonstrated to Canadians that we can and we must work together. This is truly a nation-building exercise. As we celebrate Canada's 150th anniversary and we celebrate our proud past, we have something very exciting to look forward in terms of showing how well we can strengthen our economic union. So again, this is a great day for Canada. This is a big deal for Canadians. And again, we're strengthening our home field advantage. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. And I was told, or are you coming up to do this next part? Okay, perfect. Thank you very much, Brad.
You're welcome to do that if you want. We'll do it together, like we've done everything. I'm delighted now for a number of reasons. This is the first time publicly now that I get the opportunity to pass the gavel of chairpersonship to our new chair. And it's been 21 rounds. Nav and I were joking the other day that it hasn't been easy. So they don't even they stop heavyweight fights now at 12 rounds. They don't go even 15 rounds anymore. So we've gone through 21 rounds together, and we're still friends. And we've come up with I think an agreement that's very, very ambitious. But there's still a lot of work to do. And we all acknowledge that. In fact, we've set the table to make headway on a number of issues that we weren't able to close out in these negotiations. So as we pass the gavel to our new chair, also with that gavel goes those responsibility to carry on some of those very exciting but challenging opportunities. And I think Roger Melanson will be very much up to the job. So it's my pleasure to introduce the minister from New Brunswick, Roger Melanson. Roger.
Well, I'm certainly happy that everybody's still good friends as I become the chair of the Internal Trade Committee for Canada. Quite a pleasure to be here. First, allow me to congratulate and thank Minister Duguid for the incredible job that you've done in showing leadership and in a time where you had to deal with some complex and some real sensitive issues, and being able to facilitate this historical agreement for Canada. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. I also want to acknowledge my good friend, the Minister Baines, who we've got to know each other for a few years now. And I get to tell you, his leadership across the land really shows some results, as you've given numbers of job creation. And the federal government is a true partner. And I personally want to thank also all the chief negotiators and staff that's worked so hard and done a lot of diligent work to get to this point. Je vais prendre ce moment ici pour remercier tous ceux et celles qui ont contribué à arriver au moment aujourd'hui d'avoir une entente importante et historique pour le libre-échange au Canada. I also want to recognize the outgoing chair of the Internal Trade Committee, Minister Billis, who has given me some really good advice since he's passed on the chairman position. As Canada's most trade-oriented province, New Brunswick has long been a strong supporter for reducing trade barriers and expanding economic growth within Canada. The Canadian Free Trade Agreement will provide for an enhanced opportunities for Canada, and indeed benefits to all Canadian provinces and territories. As chair of the Ministers' Committee on Internal Trade, I am tasked with leading the implementation of this agreement. I am very proud to assume this role. I am committed to ensure its implementation is smooth and that the benefits to this new agreement flow to all Canadians. Je suis fier d'assumer ce nouveau rôle. Je suis également déterminé à m'assurer que la mise en œuvre est harmonieuse et à faire en sorte que l'ensemble de la population canadienne profitera des avantages qui en découleront. In the very near future, I will be calling a meeting of the Committee on Internal Trade as we continue to work and establish the critical working groups that arose from these negotiations. While this new agreement will significantly advance the free movement of goods and services within Canada, challenges remain to improve trade in specific sectors of our economy. These new and important working groups will include the establishment of a regulatory reconciliation and cooperation table, the working group on alcoholic beverages, the working group charged with identifying economic development and opportunities in the food sector in our Northern Territories. We will also establish a working group to review and make recommendations to enhance trade in our fish and seafood product sectors. I look forward to working closely with my federal, provincial, and territorial colleagues as we move to implement this agreement. Nous sommes tous d'accord pour dire que le Canada sera le plus prospère en tant que pays libre-échangiste et qu'au bout de compte, tous les Canadiens profiteront du travail que nous accomplissons dans nos provinces et territoires. Les gouvernements ont la responsabilité d'établir des conditions propices pour une croissance économique et une création d'emplois. Cette entente répond à la réalisation de ces conditions. Voilà pourquoi nous allons s'assurer à voir à la mise en œuvre de cette nouvelle entente. I know that we all agree that our prosperity is greater as a free trading nation, and that the work that we in our respective provinces and territories ultimately benefits all Canadians. The Canadian Free Trade Agreement will provide for enhanced opportunities for all businesses, workers, and consumers in every corner of our great country, and for that, we should all be proud today. Thank you very much. Merci.
Thank you, Roger. Now we're going to do something that traditionally isn't done at these conferences, but each of my colleagues have played such an important role in this. I think it's only appropriate that they have an opportunity to speak for a few minutes each, and we're going to start with our Deputy Premier from Quebec, Lise Thiron.
Thank you. Bonjour tout le monde. Évidemment, il me fait très plaisir d'être parmi vous aujourd'hui pour prendre part à cette annonce importante au nom du gouvernement du Québec, mais également au nom de ma collègue, la ministre de l'Économie, de la Science et de l'Innovation, Dominique Anglade, qui ne pouvait pas être ici aujourd'hui. Le gouvernement du Québec est très fier d'adhérer à ce nouveau partenariat qui est issu d'un objectif commun, celui de stimuler la croissance des échanges commerciaux partout au pays au bénéfice de nos économies respectives. Dans un contexte où l'on observe une certaine montée du protectionnisme à l'échelle internationale, je crois que la conclusion de l'ALEC permet d'envoyer un signal clair à l'effet que nous sommes favorables au commerce et ouverts aux investissements. L'expansion des marchés est au cœur du plan économique du gouvernement du Québec. Des données économiques illustrent bien le rôle essentiel que joue le commerce intérieur pour soutenir les emplois et la croissance économique partout au pays. Au Québec en particulier, en 2015, la valeur estimée des exportations à destination du reste du Canada était de 71 milliards de dollars et cela représente 40 du total des exportations québécoises. Autre donnée révélatrice, à chaque année, le Québec vend plus de produits au Nouveau-Brunswick qu'il en vend à la France. Donc, je pense que plusieurs entreprises québécoises ont compris que le marché canadien présente d'énormes avantages. Exempt de tarifs douaniers, pas d'incertitudes liées aux fluctuations des valeurs monétaires, les pratiques d'affaires sont similaires d'un territoire à l'autre. Donc, il est toujours possible de faire mieux et c'est exactement ce que l'on fait avec l'ALEC. Faire mieux en réduisant le fardeau réglementaire et en éliminant, dans la mesure du possible, les barrières et les restrictions. À titre de ministre responsable de l'allègement réglementaire et des petites et moyennes entreprises, je suis particulièrement satisfaite du volet de l'ALEC qui sera consacré à l'élimination des différentes réglementations injustifiées. Trop souvent, celles-ci agissent comme un frein à la conquête des nouveaux marchés, en particulier pour les petites et moyennes entreprises. Vous me permettrez aussi de saluer l'esprit de collaboration qui a régné tout au long des travaux. Et au nom du gouvernement du Québec, je voudrais publiquement remercier toute l'équipe ontarienne pour le rôle difficile du président, évidemment, que je remercie aussi, qui a été exercé avec une main de maître pendant plus de 2 ans. J'aimerais remercier le ministre Baines, sur qui tous les ministres des provinces canadiennes ont beaucoup de plaisir à travailler, à faire avancer l'économie. Et j'aimerais rassurer le ministre du Nouveau-Brunswick et lui dire que le Québec sera partie prenante et que nous travaillerons encore avec vous, comme nous l'avons fait, pour arriver à cet accord. Merci. Bonne journée.
Good afternoon. My name is Michel Sampson. I'm the Minister of Energy, Trade et Affaires acadiennes, Francophonie for the province of Nova Scotia. Extremely honored to be here to be part and signatory to the new Canada Free Trade Agreement. Nova Scotia is an exporting province and has significant trade with other Canadian provinces. Almost 50% of our trade is with other jurisdictions within our country. Our Premier, upon his election, immediately set out to start a process of regulatory reform, which started with the province of New Brunswick and has now extended to our colleagues in Prince Edward Island and now Newfoundland and Labrador. We're extremely pleased to see the regulatory reform that is going to take place in the entire country, which was started for us in Atlantic Canada, and we're so proud to see that grow as well. I want to take the opportunity as well to extend my thanks to Minister Brad Duguid. As ministers, we all know what our workload is with our own ministerial responsibilities in our own provinces. To see the additional work that Brad took on and reaching out to us personally on the phone, the face-to-face meetings that took place was a tremendous amount of time that he committed, and I certainly want to recognize him for that. And certainly to Minister Baines, who I had a rocky relationship with at first because he stole my executive assistant that worked for me in Nova Scotia and took him to Ottawa. And so we're still awaiting for significant investments to make up for make up for him undertaking such unfortunate activities, but we know that Minister Baines has been a champion as well, and even with all his responsibilities has reached out to us personally whenever there were times of conflict or disagreements, and played a major role in us being able to achieve what we have achieved today. So merci encore, Minister Baines, pour tout. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you. Heath MacDonald, Minister of Economic Development, Tourism, Trade and Immigration in Prince Edward Island. And they gave me the shortest amount of notes coming from the smallest province. So I won't take too long. It certainly is an honor to be here. It is a significant event and it is history. Yeah, they talk a little bit about Confederation, and I don't have to tell you where that was signed. This is vital to the overall economy of my province and your province and Canada as a whole. Economic development around the world is becoming globally very, very competitive. And we got to continue to build on our strengths, and one of our strengths is collaboration and cooperation. And we're seeing it here today. As Brad discussed, and I don't know if everybody remembers, but Brad's heart was literally broken during this process, and he has reformed and come back bigger and stronger and better. And I want to commend you, Brad, on your leadership. MediaEvents, Baines, unbelievable, the federal government and the collaboration that they have showed us. And my counterparts right across the country. It's a day of recognition for each and every one of us, and it's surely something that we'll look back on and be proud of. Thank you.
Great, thanks very much. Jeremy Harrison, Minister of the Economy, Liquor and Gaming Authority, Tourism, Innovation and Trade for the province of Saskatchewan. And I just want to say that this really shows Canada works. This was a process that has taken 2.5 years, as Brad indicated. I've been Trade Minister for my province for 7 years now. And I just want to commend Brad for his leadership on this. And I want to commend Nav as well. And I thought it was really classy, Nav, that you gave James a call, Minister Moore, who did a lot of work in initiating this. So, you know, we've 21 meetings that we've had on this, as Brad indicated, some very challenging negotiations, and a remarkable continuity. A lot of us have been up here to all of these meetings over the course of the past 2.5 years and have got to be good friends, have worked together across party lines for the benefit of the country. And I think it speaks very, very well of Canada and our future that we're able to do this. So thank you very much.
Good afternoon, Darren Billis, Minister of Economic Development and Trade for the province of Alberta. I'm very proud to be here on behalf of Premier Rachel Notley, here representing our province. The new Canadian Free Trade Agreement is a good deal for Alberta and for Canada. It'll provide our businesses and investors with enhanced access to the Canadian markets for our goods and services. This modern Canadian Free Trade Agreement is very, very good news right across this country. This is about opening up markets and market access for our businesses to make it easier for them to do business right across the country. The new Canadian Free Trade Agreement levels the playing field for our companies doing business right across this country, from coast to coast to coast. And so I'd like to thank our chair, Brad Duguid, for his leadership, for all of my colleagues across the country and their teams and trade negotiators who have done an incredible amount of heavy lifting, and of course for the support from our federal government and Mr. Baines. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Christopher Mitchell-Moore, Minister responsible for Tourism, Culture, Industry and Innovation. On behalf of Premier Ball in Newfoundland and Labrador, we're delighted to be here to be a signatory of this historic agreement, the Canada Free Trade Agreement. It's quite exciting when provinces and territories and the federal government can work together and collaborate for this great nation so that we can create new opportunities to enhance trade, the procurement, reduce regulatory barriers so that businesses and Canadians can do better. This is a way to strengthen our economy, and it shows the great leadership that takes place when we all work together and we collaborate for the betterment of the country. It's quite exciting. I really thank Minister Duguid for his leadership on this file. He's been very active and engaged, and lots of conversations going forward, as well as the federal government. Minister Baines has always been engaged and going forward and collaborative as to how we build a stronger Canada. So with all my fellow colleagues that are here today, it's a pleasure. We look forward to all of our businesses in Newfoundland and Labrador and across the country to be able to benefit from this new agreement. Thank you.
Well, I can tell from the excitement in the front row that you're really looking forward to the profound statements here from Yukon. Hi, my name is Ranj Play. I'm the Minister for Economic Development, Energy, Mines and Resources, Yukon Energy and Yukon Development Corporation. I'll keep it short. I think we've covered everything. Minister, thank you so much for your leadership on this file and certainly the stick-to-itiveness to get us all here. Mr. Baines, thank you for your support. I'm most excited about the reduction of red tape. This is something that's certainly in our mandate. Premier Silver really wanted me to focus on that. And as we in the Yukon, through resource development, look at a super cycle coming at us, this is a fantastic time to implement this. So I look forward to it, and I look forward to working with you in the future. So we'll get on with the event. Thank you very much.
All right. Well, for those that are looking a little bit like they can't wait to get into questions, I believe now is the time for questions.
If you could say your name
and we are going to have a presentation afterwards where there'll be another opportunity for some more photos as well. So we're all here to answer your questions. This is not just on me. So go ahead. Yep.
Janice here.
Janice McGregor.
You coordinate. Yeah.
Janice McGregor from CBC News. I want to ask you about this table that you're constructing, the panel that will actually consider all of these divergent regulations and try and wrestle them to the ground and fix things. In our briefing, it was mentioned this is a binding process on all the signatories to this agreement. But I also understand in the fine print, there is a mechanism for a province or territory that doesn't like the reconciliation that's worked out at this table to opt out and to continue to have their own regulation, their own standard, their own certification. So it seems to me we're not necessarily going to get to a place where there's one system across Canada, that there could be all these opt-outs that weaken what's intended by this agreement. So does this really deliver what you're promising here today?
Well, what we've set up is a regulatory reconciliation table that businesses will now be able to go to their respective jurisdictional provinces and say, this is a regulation that's causing me trouble across the country. It's different in different provinces, or we have trouble with this. The table will then have the opportunity a province will bring that forward as an issue. The table will have an opportunity to take a look at that regulation. We are all sovereign governments here. And there's nothing in the fine print about this. As sovereign governments, every government has to ensure that they have the ability, if it's in the interests of their particular province or territory, or the government of Canada, for that matter, to opt out of that process. There's no way you would be able to have that regulatory process that doesn't respect the sovereign rights of each of the provinces. But what it does is if they are to opt out, it'll be in full public transparency. There will be a lot of pressure on those jurisdictions, I would expect, if there's something that's not appropriate about the regulation, to either come to a harmonized conclusion or come to another compromised conclusion that will help the business community. So as far as we know, this is the first type of process like this anywhere in the world today. There may be others, but we haven't been able to find any. So this is a first for Canada, and we're very confident that it's going to help us harmonize regulations that need to be harmonized, or mutually recognize regulations that need to be mutually recognized. That'll reduce the cost of business across this country and grow our economy and create jobs.
Could you have done this deal if you didn't offer the ability to opt out to certain governments at this table?
Oh, I don't think so. And in fact, it wasn't like there was a lot of discussion about that. These are sovereign governments, and that's not something that I would expect any government across the country would have been willing to do.
Greg Bell with BNN. Both you and Mr. Baines said this deal moves us forward because it covers all sectors of the economy. You added the caveat unless specifically excluded. Some of my newsroom counted 144 pages of exemptions, a 335-page document. Sounds like we have a long way to go on 144 points.
Well, there's no question that what we've done is we've turned the previous agreement on its head, as I've said before. The previous agreement covered 11 sectors. This agreement covers every sector in the economy. In any sector that heretofore will be identified as technology evolves, we expect there's going to be a number of sectors that will exist in the coming years that we may not even know of today. Those sectors will automatically be included in the agreement. Some of those exemptions are for technical exemptions. Many of them are. I'll give you one example. Ontario owns a bridge jointly with Michigan. We cannot commit Michigan to going outside of their contract in any way. That bridge is still open procurement, but we can't make that commitment because we don't have the authority to commit another jurisdiction. Many of them are like that. The beauty of this system is, compared to the other system, is every one of those exemptions are transparent. They're public. So you, the media, our business community, other provinces and territories can apply whatever pressures or heat you want to on our respective jurisdictions as time goes on to ensure that as Roger carries on his chair and as people succeed Roger, that we will continue to improve this agreement as we go. What we have today is a vastly improved agreement. Procurement is much more open across this province. In energy alone, I think we have $4.7 billion more procurement available across the country. There's still work to do, but we've come a very, very long way. There's a huge leap forward for us.
En fait, une question peut-être pour M. Melançon. La question de l'alcool, des boissons alcoolisées, la bière, le vin, tout ça ne fait pas partie de l'accord, mais va en faire partie peut-être dans la prochaine année. Est-ce que l'affaire Como a eu peut-être un impact là-dessus et comment est-ce qu'on va avancer en autant que cette affaire est devant les gens?
Merci pour la question. C'est certain que toute la question de l'alcool et la distribution de l'alcool au Canada, où est-ce que le consommateur peut avoir accès à le produit qu'il ou elle veut avoir, c'est quelque chose que nous allons regarder à l'intérieur du mandat du groupe de travail. Comme que nous avons annoncé, partie de l'entente, le groupe de travail prend en effet le 1er juillet et nous aurons 12 mois pour arriver avec des recommandations pour voir si et comment on peut davantage offrir un plus grand libre-échange au niveau des produits alcooliques. Vous vous rappelez que le dossier de Como est devant la Cour suprême, alors je ne ferai pas de commentaire là-dessus. Ceci dit, je pense qu'il faut reconnaître que le comité de travail va passer beaucoup de temps pour voir comment on peut arriver à réduire des barrières et augmenter la distribution de ces produits-là au Canada. Ceci dit, il y a quand même certainement des défis et on va y consacrer beaucoup d'énergie dans les prochains 12 mois, c'est clair.
Radio-Canada, Mme Thériault, M. Bain, il semble qu'il y a beaucoup plus de restrictions que d'allègement des règles en place. Est-ce qu'effectivement, les Canadiens verront un changement au 1er juillet?
Je crois que oui, ils vont voir les différents changements. Ce qu'il faut comprendre, particulièrement pour le Québec, c'est qu'il y a certaines restrictions qui demandent à ce que les gens aient résidence au Québec. Tout simplement, c'est des questions de protection du consommateur dans la plupart des cas. Je crois que les comités de travail qui seront mis en place vont faire toute la différence. Et très souvent, lorsque nous sommes conscients qu'il y a des différences entre les provinces, souvent c'est un projet de loi ou de la réglementation ou des ententes entre les provinces qui vont faire qu'on va pouvoir abaisser les barrières et repousser pour faire en sorte qu'il y ait moins d'exclusion. Évidemment, je pense que le travail se fera parmi les différents comités. Le fait que le Québec soit ici aujourd'hui, nous envoyons un message qui est excessivement positif. Je crois que toutes les entreprises, que ce soit celles du Québec ou celles du Canada, doivent avoir accès au marché ici, au même titre que lorsque nous avons des accords style avec l'Union européenne. Donc, ce sont des milliards de dollars en marché potentiel pour toutes les entreprises canadiennes et québécoises.
C'est important la gestion de l'offre de préserver la gestion de l'offre?
Je dirais qu'évidemment, il y a des enjeux. Je pense que le ministre a bien expliqué que nous avons des règles qui ne sont pas au même niveau tout partout. Il y a des enjeux, donc toutes les discussions auront lieu dans les bons forums et dans les tables appropriées.
My name's Drew Hausbeck, I work at the Financial Post. You gentlemen have said that this shows that Canada works. Yet the original deal, negotiated this with Donald's hometown, and it said there was going to be free trade amongst the provinces. So if Canada works, how come it took 150 years for you to reach the agreement you're announcing today?
Well, I can't speak for the previous 150 years. What I can say is in the last 2.5 years, we've come a very long way. And to be frank, the Agreement on Internal Trade in its time was a very important document for this country and moved us ahead at that time in keeping with the trade agreements around the world at that time. What we've done now is we've modernized that, and by taking the new approach, which is often referred to as the negative list approach, which means that any province that has a concern about putting something on the table has to transparently put that on in the agreement. That changes the whole dynamic of discussions and negotiations, and it's put us into a position where now the entire economy is covered. So we have come a long way, I think, in the last 2.5 years. I think we've come a long way in the last 150 years as well. Yep. Spain?
Thank you for that question. I mean, first point I want to make is I know there's some questions around exemptions as well. Overall, on balance, there's greater market access that far outweighs the exemptions. I think that's a very important and positive development as well. Secondly is the transparency of this particular free trade agreement. Everything is under the spotlight. So I think that puts a great deal of pressure on different jurisdictions to explain why they are looking for certain exemptions. So I think that's a very positive development. Thirdly, Canada is a country with different regions, with different histories, with different backgrounds. The fact that we are actually moving forward as we celebrate the 150th anniversary for Canada demonstrates that the future looks bright. The fact that we can come together recognizing that we have a competitive advantage when we reduce and ultimately eliminate red tape, when we harmonize regulations and deal with irritants, that this is good for the economy. This is good for a market of 35 million people plus. In a global context, we need to be open. We're a trading nation, and $385 billion of our economy is connected to internal trade. That's 20% of our national economy. And 40% of the exports done by different jurisdictions is done within Canada. So this is going to have a significant impact on the economy. This will definitely grow the economy. Some estimates say 1 to 2 percentage points in GDP. That's billions of dollars being injected into our economy. That will translate to more business opportunities for Canadian companies to create more Canadian jobs. And so I think that's the overall benefit. And clearly we recognize that different jurisdictions have a different history, a different set of circumstances. But the fact that all jurisdictions, and that's again a positive point, that all jurisdictions are working together and have signed on this, I think is a very important and positive development.
Question for Minister Baines. Mark Kuzan, by the way, CTV News. Why were the provinces and territories unable to come to an agreement to include alcohol in the Canadian Free Trade Agreement?
Well, I mean, the provinces can speak to that specifically, but I can tell you the conversations that we had around this issue. I've heard loud and clear from Canadians that they want to see this as part of the Canada Free Trade Agreement, and it is. We worked hard, very closely at the federal level, worked very closely and showed leadership in this area with the provinces and territories to put alcohol at the table. And this is a big development. Over the past 150 years, it wasn't addressed in a meaningful way. There's been modest steps taken in this area, but the fact that we actually have a process and plan in place demonstrates that the provinces and territories have come together in this area. And I think there's a lot of goodwill there, and I'm confident that we'll see meaningful progress going forward. You know, naturally, the provinces and territories generate a lot of revenue with regards to the sale of alcohol, and we have to be mindful of that as well. But clearly, they recognize that this is important for consumers. This is about more choice. This is about better price points, and we're going to make meaningful progress in that area. And the fact that it's part of the Canada Free Trade Agreement speaks volumes.
So I'll just piggyback on that a little bit. We did discuss issues around alcohol, and in the last 2.5 years, we've seen significant progress. And I'd like to think some of the discussions that we've been having and translating back to our respective jurisdictions has helped open up the accessibility of alcohol across the country. Examples would be the biggest consumer market would probably be Ontario. We now have online purchasing here where you can order, if you want, a case of wine from British Columbia, which makes Teresa Watt very happy. And all that is really opening up. Modernization, I think, is opening up our markets very much. So access may not any longer be the issue. There are some other complex issues that we want to have some further discussion in. All of us have different distribution systems that have evolved over 100 years or more in this country. Most of us are reasonably comfortable with our distribution systems because they're designed to make sure that the right people get their hands on alcohol and not underage people and things like that, so that it is distributed in an efficient and effective way. That is an issue where we need to ensure that our distribution systems are not a barrier to product. The other issue are markups. And that's something that Roger, I'm sure, will be having a lot of fun tackling as we move forward in future discussions. Within 12 months of the agreement or before, we will have a group getting together across the country of these ministers to deal with those issues. So I think we've made progress, but further progress is likely to come.
Any more questions?
Anybody else?
It's my understanding that in the framework of this deal that if marijuana becomes legalized in Canada as Liberals planned, then that will go to a committee and a discussion just like booze. Is there a danger here that that ends up just as mired in the alcohol trade for the past 150 years?
Well, I'm going to let Nav speak to this for sure. We did not spend a lot of time on that issue in our deliberations because, frankly, the legislation was just at that point, I don't even know if it was drafted at that point. We have legislation now. It's not yet passed. We do know that there's going to have to be a need for discussion on that going forward. So we have made a commitment that we would certainly, as soon as that legislation's passed, begin our discussions on that. I think what we've agreed to do amongst ourselves is, we've seen, and our history shows that we've seen 100 to 150 years of acrimony and debate about the availability of alcohol across the country. We do have an opportunity, I believe, to get this right from the start. And that, I think, is really the commitment of all of us. But before we can really engage in those discussions, the legislation has to be passed. And over to Nav.
Yeah, no. Thank you for that question. Ultimately, our government's objective when it comes to cannabis is very clear. It's about making sure that we protect our young people and keep it out of the hands of criminals. That is really the overarching objective. Once there is legislation that's presented and we're able to proceed with that, and then there's a process in place. But fundamentally, our government's objective is very clear when it comes to cannabis. It's really about protecting our young people and making sure that we keep it out of the hands of criminals and make sure that we really focus on ensuring that young people are protected.
Okay. I have one more question.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, for sure.
Perhaps I can address it to Quebec and Alberta. Does this mean we're going to see finally a national securities regulator?
Do you want me to? I thought I was going to get a break there. Financial service. No, well, for Ontario maybe. Financial services is a key part of our economy across the country. Our finance ministers have been very deeply engaged in many initiatives with regard to opening up financial services. We as a group could have dived into that area and duplicated their efforts. That could have also taken up another year of discussions amongst ourselves and made it very difficult for us to get to the other issues that we had to get to. So we will within 6 months have a negotiation begin or a discussion begin on financial services. and we're looking forward to seeing that happen. It will be ultimately, if the provinces and territories choose, part of the agreement. But the key is to get it right, and our respective finance ministers have been working actively on this issue for some time, and we didn't want to interrupt that work. Anybody else?
Perfect.
Anybody else?
Wonderful.
Thank you. Well, before we go, we have a very special presentation from the Canadian Federation of Independent Business. I'd like to call on Maura Jones, Executive Vice President, and Monique Moreau, the Vice President of National Affairs for the CFTA.
Well, what a wonderful early birthday present to the country in today's announcement. And on behalf of small businesses right across Canada, I want to say a heartfelt thank you to all of the ministers here today for your hard work. I also really want to thank your officials and staff who supported this work. We know that an internal trade agreement takes a village. And we don't underestimate for 1 minute the amount of hard work that goes into getting 14 governments across this country to agree to something like this, and that's why it's probably why it's taken so long to get us here. So we're very grateful to this group of ministers for helping us. I also want to say that I agree with Minister Duguid that this is really just the beginning, that there's a lot of hard work to do in terms of particularly with respect to the regulatory reconciliation table, which we're very excited about. And you can be sure that the Canadian Federation of Independent Business will be right there bringing you the examples and asking you for progress and reminding you of that hard work that is left to do. But today is really about celebrating, and I think that the deal that you have agreed to gives us the comprehensiveness and gives us the transparency that we need to continue to fight those red tape irritants that undermine our prosperity as Canadians in thousands and thousands of insidious ways. And we can think of no better 150th birthday gift to the country.
Donc, comme ma collègue Laura Jones a dit, au nom des petites entreprises au Canada, nous tenons à remercier les ministres du Commerce et leur personnel pour leur travail acharné pour ce formidable accomplissement aujourd'hui. Nous ne sous-estimons pas pour une seule minute le défi que représente le rassemblement de 14 gouvernements à travers le pays pour conclure cet accord. L'accord de libre-échange canadien n'est que le début et nous sommes ici pour vous encourager et ainsi à veiller que le travail se poursuive dans la bonne direction. Mais aujourd'hui, nous voulons célébrer que l'accord que vous venez de signer est un grand pas en avant. Le nouvel accord à l'intégrité, à la transparence qui va nous aider à lutter contre les barrières qui entravent la prospérité de notre pays. Nous ne pouvons penser à un meilleur cadeau pour l'anniversaire de 150 ans aux Canadiens et on vous félicite et dit bravo.
So, and now you have given us a great gift. We would like to give you a gift, and we'd like to present you with a special edition of an award that we typically give out only once a year. And in fact, this is an award we've only given out 6 of them in total, so today we're more than doubling the number of Golden Scissors Awards for cutting red tape. Now, the number one question I get asked about this award is it a real pair of scissors? And so I just wanted to demonstrate that it is, in fact, a real pair of scissors. Small businesses are a very practical group, right? And so they're going to give you we're going to give you a practical award on their behalf. And we hope that you keep this on your desk as a reminder of the importance of continuing to fight red tape, particularly on behalf of small businesses in Canada. This award, though, today does come with one downside. And that is that you probably want to check your bag if you're taking this home with you. So we will, in order to accommodate that, we will happily send you your scissors. And in fact, I should mention that you do have some missing colleagues here today, and we were able to organize that we are giving the Golden Scissors out in British Columbia, I think right as we speak right now, and we are also giving them out in Manitoba, and then we will get those in the north, their awards in NWT and Nunavut as soon as we possibly can. So with that, I'd like to ask my colleagues to help me distribute the awards. And I'll start by calling Minister Baines up so that we can say thank you and present you with your golden scissors. So here we go.
Thank you very much for that.
There you go.
Appreciate it. I haven't used one of these in a while. To let you guys know. I haven't gone to a barber in a while as well. That's how I paid for my post-secondary education.
It's wonderful.
Thank
Thank
you very
you.
much.
Thank
Are there
you.
rules that regulate scissors?
Yes, I don't know. Minister Duguid, we'd like to present you with your golden scissors and certificate and the scissors. And Minister Duguid has been, you've been a runner-up for this award about 3 or 4 times, I think. So always a bridesmaid, never the bride. Today you're the bride.
Leonardo DiCaprio of the Golden Scissors Award.
So
I finally have them.
we're pleased to finally present you one. Well deserved.
Been working on this for a long time.
Yeah, you deserve it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Minister Thiroux?
The new chair. Okay, wrong one.
Oh, no, Minister Thiroux. Sorry. We're pretty organized, but.
Okay.
Excuse.
There we go.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
For your hard work. Minister Sampson. I'll make sure I've got the right. There we go. Thank you. Minister Melanson. Yes. You made the cut, yes. Yes, of course. Congratulations on your new. Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Minister McDonald. Thank you. Minister Harrison. Thank you. Minister Billis. Minister Mitchell-Moore. Thank you. Drop it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your hard work. And Minister Pillai.
There we go.
Thank you so much for your hard work. Fantastic. And it would be wonderful, so thank you all again. It would be wonderful if we could also get a photo with all of the ministers, perhaps. And
In front of the podium here, folks. Or get one more picture with their scissors.
Do you want to hold these one? Why don't you do that?
There have been federal, provincial, and territorial.
Wonderful.